Well, this happens to be one of the more fun stories going on right now because we're in a weird situation where nobody knows who's telling the truth, with Subnautica 2 now being delayed in early access, which is designed to basically be you pay to be a playtester so you get to play the game early. It's kind of odd that they're delaying a game that's designed to not be finished anyway. But it sounds like what's going on here is we have two very strong sides with Subnautica 2. We have the developers who were fired for supposedly not working, not doing their job, not meeting deadlines, not doing what they were supposed to in general. And then we have Krafton over here being accused of just being too picky and not thinking the game's ready when it totally is. And most importantly, trying to rob the team of a $250 million payday. And it's really weird because both sides sound like they could be correct, and both sides sound like they could be lying. It is such a weird state because both statements are kind of in the right, depending on what's actually going on, but there's enough evidence to suspect both are telling the truth. This is a classic he said, she said. Problem is, both of them are saying things that are of plausible deniability. Things that are incredibly hard to decipher whether or not one side is lying. So before we go any further, like, subscribe, let's get into this. So the first argument is coming from the developers of Subnautica 2. Now, to be clear, I am a huge fan of Subnautica, but Subnautica Below Zero, which was also made by the developers of Subnautica, was a terrible game. Subnautica Below Zero was something that took a lot of the great ideas and decided to bog it down with too many details. It's an overrated DLC patched up as its own pretend game and then shipped at a $40 price tag, which is not worth paying. Another really weird aspect to this entire scenario is that allegedly DEI is somehow involved, with some people alleging that the original developers of Unknown Worlds were too heavily invested in pushing DEI, and when you look at the character designs, you can kind of believe that. Now, Unknown Worlds was always fairly heavy into DEI and into progress and whatnot. That was always present whenever they did their developer live streams back during the initial launch periods of Subnautica 1. But in a similar vein, while people are alleging that they were fired for pushing DEI too hard, when you look at Krafton's website, which I did in a very good video, one of my first videos I was actually proud of, where I went through and deep dived into their website, Krafton also has a small habit of being very proudly DEI focused while also hiding it, with extreme dedications to DEI that you actually have to dig really hard to find. Video linked in the description if anybody wants to go and check out that video. So I don't think this has to do with the DEI aspects per se, but the other alleged claim is that they were fired for being lazy, for not doing their job. And well, Subnautica original was in early access for, like almost 10 years. Now, South Korean conglomerate Krafton claims that the former Unknown Worlds leadership, which was terminated earlier this month, abandoned the responsibilities entrusted to them. On July 2nd, Krafton announced it had terminated the Unknown Worlds leadership team of Ted Gill, Charlie Cleveland, and Max McGuire and replaced them with new CEO Steve Pautsis. That's a horrible last name. In the original announcement, the company did not provide any details as to why the original team was canned, although it hinted that it might have been due to their resistance against a new review process it was instituting. It wrote, as part of its oversight, Krafton is committed to achieving regular milestones to assess progress across its creative studios. These reviews, based on clearly defined metrics and targets, will help ensure that games meet both their creative and quality standards. This process is essential to delivering the right game at the right time. Unknown Worlds' new leadership fully supports this process and is committed to meeting player expectations. But 2 days after being fired, Cleveland shared in an X post that he and the rest of the leadership team were shocked by the firing. He wrote in part, "So you can see why for Max, Ted, and myself, the Unknown Worlds team, and for our community, the events of this week have been quite a shock. We know that the game is ready for early access release, and we know you're ready to play it. And while we thought this was going to be our decision to make, at least for now, that decision is in Krafton's hands. And after all these years, to find that I'm no longer able to work at the company I started stings." Now, there's a little bit of merit there. While I understand getting rid of them from the developing team and leading the CEO position, I would have preferred they try to find a place for them within the game, because admittedly, they did create Subnautica, and Subnautica is one of the best games, and is the game that proved that the early access model can work. Then there was the stinging announcement that Subnautica would not be arriving on early access this year and has been delayed until 2026. It revealed that after a series of playtests, it discovers that there are a few areas where we need to improve before launching the first version of Subnautica 2 to the world. Our community is at the heart of how we develop, so we want to give ourselves a little extra time to respond to more of that feedback before releasing the game into early access. With that in mind, we've made the decision to delay Subnautica 2's early access release to 2026. Now, there is some area to argue about this. do you really have a justification to delay a game that's going to early access? Because once again, the point of an early access game is for the players to playtest the game. The players get to explore the game, see what works, what doesn't, and give feedback on what should be kept and what should be cut. For instance, not many people know this, but the original build of Subnautica had a digging mechanism where you could just dig through the sand, sit through it. You could actually dig full-on tunnels, but problem is, it was laggy, it would cause the game to have to retain too much knowledge, it didn't work very well, the physics weren't quite right, so they just cut it because it ended up being more of a detriment than a benefit. Even though there were some really cool mechanics you could do with it, such as digging out caves. Though that did take quite a lot of time. So while it seems to delay a game that's purpose is to be playtest, I will like to steelman Krafton's argument and just offer the fact that maybe the reason they're delaying it is if a game releases in any state bad enough, people will not give it a try. Take a look at Cyberpunk 2077, which is, as they put it, fixed now. They legitimately did fix the game. The game works perfectly. It is a fantastic game now, but people are still refusing to try it because of its initial launch state. So there is a very credible concern that releasing Subnautica to early access in a state that's borderline unplayable or just utterly boring to do so, people will be incredibly hesitant to come back or buy the game if they're hearing those reviews, and it'll take a lot of effort to convince them that it's not like that anymore. People tend to become very strict with their mindset and they refuse to shift from that position, so it's very likely that they're afraid that releasing it in too weak of a state will lead to, ultimately, longer impact of negative reception. And while I'd quite love to get my hands on Subnautica 2 and get to play with my friends a little bit, I can understand why they might delay it to ensure that it has better reception for everybody involved. Additionally, Unknown Worlds added, now that Subnautica 2 is coming out in 2026, we'll be able to add more biomes, more vehicle upgrades, additional tools, expand on our story, and include more creatures to discover. Then came a Bloomberg report, and this is where the developer's side gets a little bit strengthened and why things are still as quite weird. From Jason Schreier that claimed that the delay was so Krafton would avoid paying a $250 million bonus to the development team. The sequel's delay was against the wishes of the studio's former leadership, according to the People. The $250 million bonus was due to kick in if Unknown Worlds hit certain revenue targets by the end of 2025, according to the purchase agreement, which was reviewed by Bloomberg. By delaying Subnautica 2 into next year, the company is unlikely to hit those targets, and therefore the employees may not be eligible for the payout, the People said. Players have since launched a boycott of the game and expressed their displeasure on Steam as well as on social media. Now this is equally another likely possibility, that maybe Krafton did delay the game purely to avoid the payout, or an alternate perspective is the developers are trying to push a game that they know won't succeed very well just so they can get their $250 million payout. It's entirely likely that despite being lazy and not doing the responsibilities they had, they were trying to push the game to release in early access just so they could get that fancy little bonus, instead of realizing that the game is in poor state and would actively harm the game's reception if they release it in its current state. Both are possibilities. And now this is becoming just a journalist fight, as Krafton and the developers both make statements and both target each other and slamming them, with Krafton now making multiple requests to Charlie and Max to resume their role as game directors and technical directors respectively, but both declined to do so. In particular, following the failure of Moonbreaker, Krafton asked Charlie to devote himself to the development of Subnautica 2, however instead of participating in the game development, he chose to focus on his personal film project. The company then charged that the absence of core leadership has resulted in repeated confusion in direction and significant delays in the overall project schedule. Now, that is another thing that could possibly be happening. We took 3 indie game developers and put them under the behest of a AAA studio, or AA studio. We took what was initially just 3 guys chilling in their basement with a small team making a game at their leisure, and now we put them in a corporate setting where, oh, would you look at that, there are deadlines and there are things you must do to meet corporate requirements. And when you fail to meet those expectations, you will be lambasted for doing so. Whereas when your only behest is to the players who are with you 100%, it's a bit different. That's when you can focus on your personal desires and your personal plans at your leisure, instead of having to follow the orders of those above you. Because, well, when you're just working for yourself, there is no one above you. Now, one of the other things I find a little odd is that Krafton has come full-out brazenly confirmed that the $250 million bonus is 100% real. And 90% of it was dedicated to the 3 fired executives, and it was set with the expectation that they would demonstrate leadership and active involvement in the development of Subnautica 2. Now, this is another reason why I suspect that this was going to be more of an issue, that the developers who were not doing their job was pushing for the game to release in an incomplete state, because they're off the hook. It doesn't matter if the audience doesn't like it, because they can just blame Krafton. and then they would still walk away with their lovely little bonus. In fact, to be clear, each of the 3 CEOs would receive a $75 million boost and bonus if this is to be believed, and the rest of the team would be left with $25 million. According to Insider Gamer, that's saying that 90% of the bonus would go to the 3 fired executives. So that would, I would assume that would mean 90% of 250 is 225 million, and then you divide that by 3 for 75 million. That means that these guys weren't giving the bonus to their team. The team wasn't going to benefit from this. The 3 executives who sat on their asses, reportedly, and did nothing would have gotten a massive boost. Additionally, the company stated, "We believe that the dedication and effort of this team are at the very heart of the Subnautica's ongoing evolution. We reaffirm our commitment to provide the rewards they were promised." So it's entirely possible that now that they've gotten rid of the 3 potential, just to steelman Krafton, now that they've gotten rid of the 3 leeches who are going to take a massive boost of this bonus and not distribute it amongst the people actually working on the game, it's possible that once it releases in 2026, a new bonus will be negotiated and put out there to actually give the people who worked on the game some benefit. Now, there are no exact details on how many employees work at Unknown Worlds, especially since it was bought out by Krafton, but some estimates put it at around 294 employees. So that $25 million that would have gone to the team is actually only $85,000 per person. Not a ton, it's a good amount of money, it's a yearly income for some, but it's nowhere near compared to the $75 million bonus that the CEOs would have gotten. And then what makes this whole thing spicier is there are some leaks coming from Krafton, as somebody just decided to take photos and post them to the internet of some charts at Krafton Studios. Now, it is clear that these are photos taken from a phone. You can tell that these are someone took their phone, photographed the thing, and then sent it off to X or wherever else they posted it. And what these show is a bit of concern. It actually makes Krafton look like they might be in the right. And what this is showing is that, well, the stuff that they set out as their target goals in 2023 and 2024 have been completely missed, such as them having to remove 2 entire biomes from the release of Early Access, 1 type of Leviathan removed, fewer creatures and biomods, and character customization features excluded, the number of tools equipment decreased, and the additional vehicles excluded, custom game mode removed, and 1 narrative delayed with about 6 hours of content cut, all because they couldn't meet the deadlines that were postured to them. If this is true, and they had the means to make this work, and these were only not met because the CEOs refused to do their job, that is a pretty significant thing. That is a lot of content cut, and this could be enough to justify somebody deciding that Subnautica 2 just isn't worth their time in the long run because this content isn't there. This here also shows the target of what they wanted to be like when they launched the game in Early Access versus what it is now, with them really wanting to have another fully completed strong region, more creatures, more Leviathans, more biomods, mining and automation, farming system, approximately 30 hours of sandbox gaming and 16 hours of core gameplay with online account integration and 3 story chapters. And all of those things are missing, with only 1 region, 2 Leviathans, 2 ships, cross-progression, single-player co-op, survival default, and creative mode in 1 chapter story. There's a lot of content that supposedly Krafton wanted to be there that just isn't. Now, there is some question to the validity of these leaks, because, first of all, we don't actually know who leaked them. They just kind of appeared online. And even weirder is that Krafton full-heartedly endorsed these leaks as saying that they're honest. It is entirely possible that Krafton themselves leaked these documents, or these documents could be completely fake, and they leaked them just to make themselves look better. And then, of course, it gets complicated even more because the 3 developers who were fired from Unknown Worlds are now going and suing Krafton, claiming loss of income, unrightful firing, and a bunch of other things. And this is causing such weird confusion, because usually when developers sue the big bad corporation, they're generally correct in doing so. Not always, but generally that's a good trend to follow. And in this case, there's absolutely none of that. There's no justification for what they've done, and it looks like, shockingly enough, Krafton might be in the right, and I'm actively baffled by that. When I first heard the initial bits about this story, I was fully ready to believe the developers, that they were fired unceremoniously and their baby product taken away from them for not pushing certain aspects of social culture maybe, or something else, or just deciding that they didn't want to do the payout. But now the more I look into it, the more I read and the more I see, the more clear it becomes that maybe Unknown Worlds and Krafton might actually be in the right, and the developers, in fact, were the ones who weren't doing their job. But I only know so much, I only see so much, and I can only report on so much. So, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. Do you guys think that Krafton actually fired these people for a good reason? Or were they fired just so Krafton didn't have to pay out that hefty $75 million to each of the developers? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys on the next one.